Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is Room by Emma Donoghue. Now, this was published in 2010, and this was recently made into a movie in 2015, and this copy of the book I have is actually the movie tie-in edition, because the cover here is also the poster for the movie. Now, I recently watched the movie Room. I actually watched it right after I finished reading this book, and I'll talk a little bit more about the film adaptation of this book at the end of this review. Now, I don't know any other way to describe it. This book fucked me up. This book really did emotionally fuck me up. And I mean that in a good way. Like, this book really did play with my emotions, and I'll admit it, I cried like a little bitch when reading this book. Like, this really is, like, it's one of the most devastating and heartbreaking and really depressing books I've ever read, and it also is a very disturbing book when you really think about the subject matter, but it's also one of the most beautiful novels I think I have ever read. Like, I really do think this is one of my favorite books now. Like, I already have a list of, like, my top 15 favorite books, but if I ever made a list of my top 20 or top 25 books, I'm pretty sure I would end up putting this book on that list. Like, this is a very emotionally draining novel, and it also has some very disturbing subject matter, but I think because of this novel's narrator, even though it does have some really disturbing subject matter, there is a feeling of optimism throughout the novel. I think because of the fact that it's narrated by a 5-year-old boy who really doesn't understand what's actually going on in the story, and I thought that was really kind of brilliant about the novel, that it's all told from the point of view of this 5-year-old kid who really doesn't know what's actually going on, and it's like, as you're reading it, you're learning with him what's actually going on. Now, the plot of Room is it follows this 5-year-old boy named Jack, who also narrates the whole novel, and Jack lives in this small room, which he calls Room, and he was actually born in Room, and has spent the first 5 years of his life in this room, which his mother, who he just calls Ma, told him was the whole world. Like, his mother told him that there was nothing else besides Room. So, in the beginning of the novel, from Jack's point of view, Room literally is the whole world. And every night, Ma makes Jack sleep in this wardrobe, because every night this man, who Jack calls Old Nick, comes to Room, and Jack doesn't really understand who exactly Old Nick is, or what exactly Old Nick does to his mother, but you as the reader, you start to understand exactly who Old Nick is, and exactly what Old Nick does to Jack's ma. Now, I just want to forewarn people that I am going to be giving away some minor spoilers in this review. Like, in the book, you eventually find out that years before the events of this story, Ma was actually kidnapped by Old Nick, and she has been held captive in Room for all these years, and every night Old Nick comes to Room to rape her, and because she was raped, you could probably already figure out where Jack came from. But yeah, the basic plotline of this novel is it follows Jack in Room, which he thinks is the whole world, but you realize that it's actually a prison to Jack's mother. Now, eventually in the book, and this is a minor spoiler, but they do eventually escape from Room. I'm not going to say how they escape, but they do eventually escape from Room, but the book does not end there. The rest of the novel from then on is really about Ma adjusting to the world after spending all these years in captivity, and it's also about Jack adjusting to a world that is completely alien to him. But yeah, Room by Emma Donoghue is an excellent novel, and I really think is a brilliant book, and this book really did play with my emotions in a lot of ways, and once again, I'll admit, I cried during this book. Like, this really is a very emotionally draining novel, but it's one of the most beautiful books I have ever read. Now, as much as I loved this book, I will admit the writing style in the novel does take a little getting used to, because it's all written from Jack's point of view, so it's written like it's actually a 5-year-old talking to you. Like, you'll understand if you read the book, but the writing style does take a little getting used to, but if you can get used to the writing style, it's worth it. Trust me, it's worth it. Now, there does seem to be some religious metaphors in this story. Like, for example, the main villain of the book is called Old Nick. Now, Old Nick is actually another name for the devil, and you could even look at Room as being this, like, hell on earth that Old Nick has built for Ma, but in the story, Ma tells Jack that he actually came from heaven, so you could even look at Jack as representing an angel. Like, you could look at Jack as kind of representing this one ray of salvation in this hell on earth that Ma unfortunately has to live in the beginning of this story. And I thought it was so interesting having the book told from the point of view of a child who couldn't possibly understand everything that's happening in the story, but the book does kind of make the point that children do understand more than we as adults give them credit for. Like, children, even really young children, are a little more sophisticated than adults really give them credit for. Now, Room is not exactly a horror story, but there is some really horrific stuff in this book, and I think if this book was told from the point of view of Ma, then I would say this is definitely a horror story, but since it's told from the point of view of Jack, it's kind of on a completely different level than what I would call a horror story. Like, I wouldn't say this is a horror novel, even though the subject matter in this book is really horrific. But yeah, Room by Emma Donoghue is an excellent book, and I cannot recommend this book enough. Now, Room, as I said, was recently made into a movie of the same name, which came out just last year in 2015, and unfortunately, when the movie came out, I think it only got a limited release, and I think because of that, the movie fell under a lot of people's radar, which I think is definitely a shame, because the film Room was an excellent movie, and was also a really good adaptation of the book. Like, the movie Room was actually pretty true to the book. Like, it did change a few things here and there, and the movie did leave out some characters from the book, but really, what film adaptation of a book doesn't do that? But once again, the movie Room was an excellent movie, and unfortunately, I think that film really did fall under a lot of people's radar. Like, I didn't even hear of the movie until I was watching the Oscars this year, and I saw that this one little film called Room was getting all these different Oscar nominations. So that's when I first heard about the movie, and then I heard about the book. But Room really was an excellent movie, and definitely deserved all the Oscar nods that it got, although it probably should have won a few of those Oscars. But I highly recommend the movie, but if you've seen the movie and haven't read the book yet, I definitely recommend reading the book. But once again, that's my review of Room by Emma Donoghue, and bye.